We all experience the world in a different way. Life circumstances drawing us to environments where we feel most free. 30-year-old Andrea Lewis is a curator of works and paper at Ezekiel Museum. She was born profoundly deaf. Yet despite this, she's achieved extraordinary things. She has a master's degree in art history and holds down an important job in the mainstream. For Andrea, art is a place of refuge, a world of colour and form where the spoken word is not needed, a place where she's truly at home. Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
Very well.
Meeting you in your world.
Welcome to the gallery.
That's beautiful. It really is about the visual for you.
Definitely. With art and with artworks, I suppose it's like the equivalent to music.
Yeah.
It's my music. They express the mood, emotions, ideas. The visual is my primary way of relating to the world.
Andy is, as you know, profoundly deaf. We didn't know that until she was 9 months old. When she was about 4 months old, my husband became concerned that she wasn't reacting to sound. I thought he was talking nonsense, but I took her off to a pediatrician. And he rang a little bell and she looked and he said, "Are you worried?" And I said, "No." He said, "Your mother knows best." And so we left it. But when she was 9 months old, I saw her with 2 babies who were the same age. They were babbling away and Andy was totally silent. I took her to the Wits clinic. I could just see from the way they were behaving that there was something seriously wrong. She had no hearing at all of high-frequency sounds, although she had residual hearing of low frequency.
What were your feelings at the time of that diagnosis?
Fear, mostly. Fear of having a child with whom I couldn't communicate. Fear for her future.
For my parents, it was a huge shock. Communication is the most important aspect in relationships. And then suddenly, when communication is flawed, I think that they didn't know what to do.
That's a picture of Andrea wearing a very old-fashioned hearing aid. It was attached by a long cord to a box, which she wore on her chest. When she got cross, she'd take them out and throw them.
When I was a very small child, I just didn't think or realise the consequences or the implications of hearing loss. I just was.
This is a picture that I love. It shows Stephen, her dad, and Johnny, her brother, and Andy at the fun fair. She loved things like that. She still does bungee jumping and all sorts of dangerous things.
I have an older brother, Jonathan. I think he also became part of the support network around me. He was also my link to the outside world.
This is of her nursery school class, a school that was part of the units for hearing impaired and language impaired children that was run by Wits.
When I went to nursery school, all the other children were also deaf. The way we communicated with one another was similar.
How did you communicate?
With a combination of spoken language and signed English, which is not quite sign language.
The first real decision came when she had to leave the nursery school, which had been an enormously nurturing environment.
There is a debate when parents have a deaf child as to whether they're going to go the signing route with that child or integrate them into the mainstream.
Any parent of a deaf child could never not be aware of the politics involved in the deaf world. There's a very strong belief among some people that children who are born deaf should be included in the deaf community rather than in the hearing world.
We decided we would experiment, put her in a mainstream school where there was some support for her, and take it term by term, year by year. I really wanted a child who lived in my world, and that's a selfish view. But I also wanted a child who would cope in the ordinary world, who wouldn't be part of a different world.
For Andrea, growing up and being at school 15, 20 years ago, it was much more difficult. Most deaf children were going to signing schools.
What are these two grandmas doing at the table?
They eat in muffin and cake.
There's much more available now than there used to be. Children who are born profoundly deaf are able to access hearing through cochlear implants and much better hearing aids.
After nursery school in a supportive environment, Andrea went to a mainstream primary school where she was the only deaf child.
It was a huge shift in my life. I remember in my very first day of school, I wore an FM system, which is a box around my neck that would amplify the teacher's word. I sat down with other children and they immediately started surrounding me saying, "What is it? What is it?" And I said, "I'm deaf." And they said, "But what's that?" It planted the seeds of awareness that I really had a hearing loss and that it made me different.
Hearing people have very little understanding of what it's like to be deaf. So you are quite isolated and you've got to really work very much harder to be accepted and cope. Even with hearing aids, she didn't get enough to be able to understand any speech without having to use lip reading as well.
Her primary school days were always difficult, but we persisted, and by the time she was sort of reaching the end of primary school, she was clearly coping. When Andy was in Standard 4, Standard 5, another decision needed to be made about where she would go to high school.
I wanted to go to Corporate College, and high school that was very much focused on academic achievement. Everyone was really anxious about whether I would be able to cope. So they accepted me only on a trial basis, and that just sort of sparked, the determination to really succeed.
She wanted to be part of an ordinary world, a world where she had already made friends, in which her brother lived, in which her parents lived, and she was willing to do what it took to be part of that world.
Thirty-year-old art curator Andrea Lewis was born profoundly deaf. Yet from an early age she was determined to function effectively in the mainstream. Few know what it's taken to get to where she is today. Andrea project manages exhibitions, engaging with the public and all the players needed to do her job. It's a world she loves, but one that requires enormous focus each and every day. Her determination began as a young girl, and by the time she reached high school, she applied to well-known Crawford College and got in on a trial basis.
You decided to go to an academically driven mainstream high school.
Yes, I did. I wanted to prove to everyone that just because I'm deaf doesn't mean that I don't have the same abilities.
In high school, Andrea crossed paths with researcher Carla Resnick, who became a close friend.
My research involved how Andy was mainstreamed and why mainstreaming worked for her as opposed to going to a school for the deaf and using sign language. I remember seeing how she was watching and picking up what was going on, but also how shy she was. Fitting in socially because of her deafness and feeling that she was part of the crowd, part of her group, I think was even more difficult than picking up on the academic work.
It was hard for me to banter, so I think whenever you had a conversation with me, it was often of a more serious note. So I just wanted to be part of the light-hearted context, and it was not easy to participate in that. The hearing aid was never enough in terms of good conversations or in terms of the classroom environment. It just wasn't.
She said that she only picked up about 2% of what was taught to her in class, which means that 98% was self-taught.
It was very difficult at the beginning. I just had to read a lot more. I had to figure things out on my own because I never really followed any of the lectures.
She did amazingly well at school.
She did.
Senior full colours for academics at the mainstream school.
She insisted on doing 7 subjects for matric. She got 6 distinctions. And there she is with the Premier at a special awards ceremony for high-achieving matric students.
When Andy was about 18 or 19, I took her to St. Vincent's School for the Deaf.
She was just curious about what I would have thought of a deaf world, because at that point, I don't think I had spoken to another deaf person for more than 10 years. It was so strange to see all the deaf children signing to one another. I did feel quite sad that I missed out on that ease of communication.
Here was a girl coming in with hearing aids, you know, profoundly deaf, but couldn't sign, so she wasn't part of their deaf culture.
I think I was seen as someone who betrayed the cause. I have become owl, but I was also quite grateful that I had the chance and the means to be part of the bigger world.
Andrea has had years of speech therapy, which she still continues today.
I thought today, let's work on hearing the fine differences between words that sound very similar to each other. Zodiac.
Good man. Zodiac.
Try again.
Zodiac.
Better. Zinnia.
Zinnia.
Good. Try it.
Zinnia.
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 Let's just do another couple with it at the end.
Okay.
With improvements in technology, deaf people today have the option of cochlear implants. It's a surgically implanted device that works by delivering impulses directly to the auditory nerve, which in turn carries these signals to the brain. A receiver is implanted under the skin behind the ear.
I actually came across cochlear implants when I was a teenager. But the moment I saw what a cochlear implant was like, I immediately rejected the thought.
It looks like that underneath the skin, and then there's a wire that goes through the bone, this hard bone behind your ear, into the cochlea. This is the electrode. It has a magnet that would hold the coil that goes over the skin, and they stick together like that, so that that picks up the sound. And then this tiny little part over there is what goes into the cochlea.
I didn't want to be any more different from my friend, so the whole concept of having a device on your head was very off-putting. I suppose when you're a teenager, you're quite vain. I just didn't really want to change myself. I felt quite defiant.
In her universe, she was the only person who had these hearing aids and was deaf. And yet, when I met her, she was very proud to be deaf. She wasn't interested in having a cochlear implant. She was dead against it because she had this pride in being deaf.
After school, Andrea wanted to broaden her horizons and took on another challenge. She enrolled for a BA in History of Art at University College in London.
The decision to go to London and to study in a foreign environment was a difficult one. She took that leap. She wanted to do it. She wanted to be in London. It was an exciting place, and that's where art is.
I really wanted to explore the world. I thought it was a really exciting opportunity.
I just felt terribly apprehensive. I was worried about her managing again in a very academically competitive environment.
The first month that I was in London was very, very difficult and very overwhelming. It was like landing with a hard thump. The next, she was speaking with a very strong English accent. It was like trying to figure out Chinese for all I knew.
And again, you needed to work much harder than everybody else.
I just felt like I had to draw quite a deep wall of courage. But The moment I got to know some of the people in my class and stuff, everything just fell into place. It was fabulous going to the Tate Modern, to the National Gallery, to the Tate Britain, and have your classes in those spaces. The topic of the cochlear implant came up again in my early 20s, and the time I decided to really keenly explore the option. And I probably agonized about it for 5 months.
I think it's a very big step for a number of reasons. Firstly, the potential of losing your residual hearing, because that's all you've had all your life. And then the other big factor is a complete change in the kind of sound that you hear.
Andy was extremely resistant to having a cochlear implant because she had worked so hard at becoming who she was, by overcoming her deafness, overcoming the issues, by going to the UK, studying, lip-reading different accents. I mean, she had achieved so much, and it was almost like starting at the beginning again and denying her right to be deaf.
Having to make that move and to say, I need more help than hearing aids are giving me, was a big leap for her.
What was shocking to me and to Andrea was not the thing in the head, but that she might become a different person. Andy was the girl I loved, and I loved her as she is. And I thought suddenly she might become different. What would it be like to have a hearing daughter? And I actually didn't want to change.
She'd had hearing with hearing aids, but it wasn't quite enough to give her the upper edge in a working life and being able to move forward.
When I came back to South Africa and I started living in Cape Town and working, I realized that it's actually not such a bad thing really to get all the help that I needed.
She came and was assessed in our program here at Tygerberg Hospital, and she decided to go ahead with it.
Just before they put me to sleep, I kept thinking, why am I doing that? And when I woke up, I was disorientated. I had stitches in my head, there was a bit of blood trickling down my face. And it just seemed like a crazy decision to have undertaken.
Andrea Lewis had lived as a profoundly deaf person for 23 years with only hearing aids to help her navigate the hearing world. Her decision to have a cochlear implant, despite the risk of losing her residual hearing, has changed her experience of the world and herself forever.
You have the cochlear implant and the surgery first, and then you wait for 6 weeks before they do the switch on.
It's a long wait because you have no hearing in that ear. You can't use your hearing aid. So the world has become even more silent.
I went with my parents. They've flown down to Cape Town, especially for the occasion. And we all went to the Tygerberg Hospital, where I met with Jenny. She said that it was going to be like a butterfly's wings on my cheek because it's going to be quite a physical sensation. She switched on and I think I jumped out of my skin. And suddenly, huge noises filled my head. People were talking. There were noises outside the office. I just remember thinking the footsteps are making a noise. I didn't want to cry in front of Jenny or my parents. That time to come to terms with the moment. I had to have faith that it will be okay, because in the first month it felt like a really bad mistake.
You were hearing sounds that you'd never heard for the first time. It's very different to somebody who was born hearing, lost it, and then had the cochlea.
Very much so. I had no audio memory of sound. That everything was the right noise. That even though I was hearing things, didn't necessarily mean that I had the ability to comprehend or recognize. There was a lot of hard work in distinguishing sound. Would you like a cup of tea? After the cochlear implant, everything's really noisy. The kettle, the spoon, that was the biggest surprise in terms of the kitchen.
Andrea was confronted with a completely new world. She started hearing sounds she'd never been aware of before.
The back of my head makes a noise. Hearing myself breathe. All these small little things that were quite unexpected discoveries. The sound of the sea, it's a really beautiful sound, soft, gentle sound, whereas really high-pitched noises like seagulls and children's voices really annoying.
Andrea's professional life was also transformed. With the implant, she's been able to engage on a completely different level. Her recent involvement in a panel discussion on rediscovering voices in the arts that were silenced by apartheid would never have been possible before.
I was able to participate in that panel discussion because I could sit at the front and follow the speakers, whereas I think in the past I wouldn't have even gotten 2% of any of the conversation. I really had to rely on my hearing rather than the reading. Total quietness is a very nice place to be in, actually. In a way, I'm very lucky that I can just switch off my hearing aids and my cochlear implant and just chill.
I think that a great deal of her personality, that extraordinary courage, comes from having to deal with adversity. And that makes me feel so enormously proud. I just love her so much for who she is. I wouldn't change her. If I could be told that I could wave a magic wand tomorrow and that Andrea would be a hearing person, I would not want that. And I don't think she would either.
Where do you go to for sustenance and for spiritual strength?
When you have the support and faith of the friends and family, it's the most important thing. I think it's really a lot to do with the faith of others in you.